You know where you are!
This is Appetite for Distortion.
Welcome to the podcast, Appetite for Distortion, episode number 395. My name is Brando. Another two-guest episode for you today. Coming up later on under Appetite for Discovery, we get to meet John Diva from John Diva and the Rockets of Love. They have a new album, their third album, The Big Easy, coming out on March 17th. If you like hair metal and there's the old school 80s vibe, Van Halen, GN'R, obviously they are for you. So coming up, John Diva. But first, a band that's been doing it for so long, Overkill, lead singer Bobby Blitz. They have their 20th album coming out, Scorched. Let's find out all about it. And of course, the 6 degrees of GN'R bacon, if he has any. Hey, Bobby, how are you, sir?
Brando, pleasure to be here with another guy from the area, from the tri-state area. I'm doing quite well over here in New Jersey.
Right on. Where in, I always say this as a New Yorker, I really don't know a lot of New Jersey. I always know MetLife Stadium because that's where all the concerts are, but where in New Jersey are you?
Are you a native New Yorker or?
Yeah. I family's from Brooklyn. I'm in Queens currently, grew up on Long Island, but New Jersey, it's
like a foreign country.
Exactly. I was just about to say that. We're heard all over the world, so maybe people don't understand. Like, oh, New York, New Jersey, right next to each other. There are toll bridges. It's just this.
You need a passport to get in here. You got to go through security. You got to go through customs.
I know.
I'm approximately 60 miles west of the George Washington Bridge.
Okay.
So I live up in Northwest Jersey. I'm closer to Pennsylvania than I am to New York City. I'm only about 20 miles from PA. But this is what they call the Skylands. It's kind of a resort area. It's the part of Jersey that many people from Brooklyn and Queens, we try to keep the hell out of here. So, well, the point being is it's a resort area. Ski slopes, outdoor. I've had black bear hibernate on my property now for 15 years. So I've known all the moms, all the cubs.
Oh, wow.
Et cetera, et cetera. And I've also, simultaneously I've raised German Shepherds. So having black bear on the property and having German Shepherds, you think it would be a big issue. But all it is it's a push and shove of stay back, go beyond the fence, that kind of a thing, So it's actually cool. I mean, if you're into the nature and riding motorcycles and skiing, this is the place to be.
Has that ever inspired a song? Have you ever written a thrash song about a bear?
No, I haven't written it specifically about the bear, but there can be those frightening moments. I have an old chalet. It's kind of like where you'd go when you were skiing, to fireplace and a whole bit. And my office was in the basement that looked out to the back. And I was writing, I forget what record. It might have been the Ironbound record. And sure enough, there's one at the window. I mean, I'm talking 400 pounds of black standing up, peeking in through the side window. Must have smelled something cooking. And it scared the shit out of me enough to actually finish the song. So I didn't write about the bear, but the inspiration was there.
Okay, I'll take that. I appreciate that. And because before, I'm glad we started out this way as far as where you are locally and off the air. We were just talking briefly. You thought this was a Mets shirt. No, it's the Knicks. They're actually playing well this time around.
That's right.
Because before we get into your 20th album, which is insane, Scorched, I want to find out what it was like growing up in New Jersey for you when you were almost like the first. You were the first before Metallica, before the big four. Overkill started right in 1980. So I'm just curious how that happened when you were kind of the leader or the beginning, the genesis of this movement. Who were you looking to as a kid for inspiration, and how did you form your sound?
It's a good question, but I think there's a misconception here because this has been formed by via the internet where all things are fucking true.
That's why I ask. I know I'm going to be wrong half the time with the things that I ask. So that's why I ask them.
We started in 1980, yes, but we were a cover band. So there was no Overkill great dream of breaking the thrash barrier. We were doing everything from AC/DC and the Scorpions to some Iron Maiden, the early Iron Maiden, Judas Priest, but we were mixing it with punk rock. So I think really the formula for thrash is kind of a traditional and new wave of British heavy metal mixed with the punk of the day. Now, I think that what was happening out in the West Coast was simultaneously was the same thing, but they beat us to the punch with regard to writing their own songs. That said, they also had a different punk. We had a scene here in New York City. I actually attended Manhattan College down in the Bronx, and I did so. It was the late 70s, so I could be part of that punk scene. We had the Dead Boys, we had the Ramones, we had the early Blondie, Patti Smith, Television, New York Dolls, Johnny Thunders. Goes on and on. In any case, I wore a safety pin occasionally. But, but we mixed our metal with that. And there were the differences between the two. But those guys for sure beat us to the punch with Metal Up Your Ass, and then the record that followed, Kill 'Em All. And it's, so there really is no debate about the whole thing, who was first. They changed the scope of music or the entire landscape. And, I'm not here kissing ass. I'm just trying to set the record straight.
No, I appreciate that, because I'm here to be educated. I want to know. So I guess when you were, being a cover band and your inspiration is a lot of these punk bands, how did you form the Overkill sound? How did you formulate the band that it is all these years later, 20 albums later? When did that idea? Was it because you heard what the West Coast was doing? You're like, oh, let me try this? Or what was the beginnings of the formulation of the Overkill we know now?
I got a very quick addendum to that first answer before we go on to this.
Sure.
And that is, Brando, that they may have done that out in San Francisco, but they had to come to fucking New Jersey to get it released by Megaforce Records. So there. So we have hands on both sides of the states here, because we were later signed to Megaforce. I think the band developed naturally with regard to that. When I had met Dee Verney and the original drummer Rat Skates. I was playing with a guy, Rob Pasaric. I mean, we were just college students having some fun. And Rob wasn't a punk guy, but Dee and Rat were, and so were I. So that's when it started, you started forming your alliances and starting going out to these shows. And I remember seeing the Dead Boys at the Ritz in 1981. And they didn't even have a bass player. And Steve Baders, the singer, said, he's not here tonight, but we need the money. And we were like, what the fuck? This is awesome. But it developed around that. I think that you started, it's kind of like baking something. You have so many ingredients into it that eventually it just turns out a certain way. And if you're not following a recipe that's exact, you don't know what the result's going to be. In our case, it became thrash, or East Coast thrash, based on the East Coast punk. But that developed very quickly after that, those formidable years. And by 1985, we had released, and we're still doing punk covers up to that point, and still to this day, throw a punk in here and there.
That right on that. See, I love learning about how these things form and where we get today. So what about the legendary voice of Bobby Blitz? When did you realize you can hit those notes and sing like that? Because not everybody can do that. You can do that.
You're probably yelling at home with my brothers and sisters. My mother goes, "Stop that. You're giving me a headache. My God, it's like nails on a chalkboard."
Did your parents love what you were doing, or did they think that it was kind of a phase?
My mom was a singer. She actually toured with Mitch Miller.
Oh.
I remember her singing voice before I remember her speaking voice.
Wow.
And she sang to all her kids. She was first generation Irish American, and she had 8 sisters. So there's 9 girls in the family, and 4 boys. And the girls would harmonize around. They would harmonize around the fireplace on weekends for my grandparents. So this was like, what? The only reason I became a singer was not because I was good. It was because I was not afraid. Most guys are afraid to stand behind the mic. I'm not doing that. I'm going to embarrass myself when you're a kid. But I couldn't really sing. I didn't have my mother's talent, but I had something in there that said, I'm not afraid to do this. We do this at home all the time. That's her 8x10 right there.
Oh wow, what a beautiful woman. I love that old
From
school.
that's from the Copacabana in New York. Yeah.
Oh, that old school
So I
look.
mean, there's a legacy here. So there's of course that she lived vicariously through me because she decided to start a family with a sailor she met from the Korean War.
Mm, mm. See, I love that. Just a sweet story. Somewhere there'll
Yeah.
be a rom-com written about your family's life. So flash forward a lot. Did you ever foresee 20 albums and doing this for so many years, overkill? I mean, did you ever foresee this happening in your life, or was it again you starting this band and maybe you were going to get a 9 to 5 and band would be kind of your side gig? Did you always know that this was going to be your life?
I didn't. I knew it was the biggest turn on. I knew it was a desire. But that, the length of the career or the length of the amount of time invested is all hindsight. I mean, I was never long-sighted. I was one of those people that was living in the moment. In many cases, I still do. Sometimes it's a blessing. Sometimes it's a curse. I think that partnering with Dee Verney over all these years, we have differences in our personality where you get the best, where I'm more of an immediate person and he's more of a long-sighted person. So we're prepared for the future, yet we can explode in the moment. And I think if you take both of those together, you get the best of both worlds. But if you asked me back in '87 on the second record, I didn't know if there was going to be a third record. I mean, I just didn't have, there was no rules. There was no road to follow here. It was just happening around you and forming itself from day to day. So you couldn't say, oh, well, we're going to do this and we're going to get in the old musicians union, or then we're going to go to AFTA and then we're going to, none of that happened. It just was show after show after year after year after record after record. And you turn around and you have to decide for yourself, was it satisfying or was it not? And at this point, I mean, it's always been satisfying for me. 40 years in Levi's and motorcycle boots. I mean, what could be better?
So I guess, how do you feel today? I mean, you kind of answered that you have your 20th record coming out, Scorched, April 14th. How do you look at that? Did it go by in a blip, or you're like, oh, look at everything I accomplished? Do you sit back and remember and appreciate, or is it just, are you looking toward your 30th album at this point?
Well, again, I'm not looking toward the 30th record. That's really, it's me to live in Scorched at this point. To not really live in the last record, or not to live in the pandemic. What was the, not to say, oh, this ruined me. I think more in terms of the most important thing for me is to be relevant in the current day, to not be a novelty act. The point that we can still take that old house and put a fresh coat of paint on it every couple of years gives us new opportunity. And to be able to force those parameters out, I mean, to aspire to be a better guitar player, songwriter, drummer, singer, bass player, that's what gets you good results. That's what keeps you out of the old novelty section in the vinyl stores.
So I guess, how do you feel? And I know it could be a tricky thing to answer, and you clarified a little bit earlier about as far as who was quote unquote first, and I don't think it really that might matter when you're all kind of forming a sound in different parts of the country. But you see, Metallica, you see Megadeth. Do you see them as, they've been doing it for a long time also, but they've gone through a lot of band changes, a lot of things, and then Overkill has almost been you have as well, but you've been very consistent, putting out, not waiting long between albums. Is there any sort of, do you look at them like, where's our flowers? Are we not getting the same notoriety, I guess, as some of the other? I mean, for me and a lot of the metal bands, the thrash bands, we know, but it's not a household name like a Megadeth, like a Metallica. I hate to say that, but I guess, I
want a parade too.
Yeah. I guess, or do you not even think about that? Does it not even matter to you? Because that's not what it's all about.
Well, I think if you're looking at it from the outside, you have an opinion, but if you're living it from the inside, it's a different world. I think I answered in the last one. I said, it's been 40 years in Levi's for me. No, I mean, that is a testimony to a life well lived. I can't think to myself, in terms of what could have been, or if we only did this, or we could have been them. That's ridiculous. I can't speak for them. I look at my own success or my own happiness based on my own success. If you want to even take this a step further, if we're, let's say, the second tier of this, there's a third tier that wants to be the second tier. And there's a fourth tier that would kill to be the third tier. And so it's not a matter of, I want that. Do I want it? Sure. Am I dissatisfied with what I have? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Could that be the reason I never attained that higher level? Could be. But the point is, I'll never know because of the satisfaction I have in this. I'm not going to look at my life and say, oh, poor me, it should have been more. It was a lot just to begin with.
And that's a great perspective. And it's not even, because I know you said it right at the beginning, where it's the outside perspective, the fan, how they look at it and how you are living it. It's two different viewpoints. But I guess sometimes it's like you've been doing it for so long, and even with this new album, which kicks off so hard, so fast, and it's just, why isn't if you do an interview, or if Dave Mustaine does an interview, you'll see Dave everywhere, but Bobby Blitz, hopefully, you see everywhere. So it's interesting where it's a similar sound, but the outside, the way that we view it, I don't know. It's just, again, the fan versus the band. We're creating controversies where they don't need to be. It's just an interesting perspective, but I like the way you look at it, because, like you said, you've been living your life and enjoying it and been successful, regardless of how fans may see it.
My niece is a school teacher right now, and she, in high school, she was doing a project, and she was taking kind of a survey, and she was writing about the people in her family and their careers. And she went through my brother, who was an attorney, her mom, who was a nurse, et cetera, just right down the line. She got to me. She said, I know you're a singer, and I know you go touring, and I know you write songs. I mean, are you like Metallica? And I said, no. I said, we play a similar type of music, but we're not like Metallica. What's the difference? I said, well, here, see if you get this. I said, Metallica endear themselves to the masses. We alienate the masses and endear ourselves to the minority, and that minority would kill for us.
See,
she got it.
yeah. That's kind of what the answer I was looking for, and I appreciate that, as someone who really tries to stick to who I am and to please the masses. I mean, that's just seems to be I don't know, that could be a winless war. Just be who you are, be yourself, and you'll be happy with what you do in life. So tell me about Scorched, and the pandemic kind of made it delayed. How long did it take to work on this record? Would it, because usually you're pretty quick turning out records. Did it delay Scorched coming out?
24 months. We're usually, we're showing our face every 24 months. We run on a clock of, write, record, promote, release, tour, write, repeat. And, if you don't tour at our level, then the record could be a wasted effort, because the touring itself is what gives the record legs at our level, because it's a one-on-one type of a situation with us. It's obviously smaller venues or theaters, but we have to get out there and be able to show that these songs exist in a live circumstance. The same for bigger bands, but we have to do it simultaneously. I mean, we have to do it simultaneously with the release and have it over that period of time without clock runs that I just talked about. In this case, we were originally slated for April 21. I had the demo right at the lockdown. We were on the road. We were sent home. I mean, obviously we're on the road. I mean, that's where we live in many cases. We were sent home from the Carolinas, and I started messing around with it by the 20th of March, thinking that we were going to release in approximately a year. We had set up the guy to mix it, Colin Richardson and Chris Clancy from the UK. And then shit just hit the fan. It just kept getting extended and extended. So Didi and I, my partner, talked about it and said, we got to wait. We have to try to time this so that this doesn't become a lost entity in our discography. That's something that's just there that a certain amount of the people pick up, but the rest missed because we didn't have the chance to tour it. So I do think that the 4 years, it's almost exactly 4 years, 4 years, 2 months between records, longest time we ever took. I think the results show themselves in Scorched. We've never taken that amount of time, but with that amount of time have actually been able to push those boundaries outward to make the parameters different than they had been in the past and come up with something that's really eclectic. It's metal, but it's traditional metal. It's thrash, but it goes to progressive thrash. It's groove, but it almost goes to blues sometimes. It's rock and roll, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you go down that whole scope of things. We've written a record for ourselves that has covered every base that we liked as kids and then later on musicians, and tied the whole thing together with an Overkill sound. So it's something I'm really proud of.
Was it almost a blessing in disguise? Maybe the delay did allow you to do more with the songs in the album than it previously would have, since you're kind of churning it out before, because what'd you say, 24 months turnaround usually?
Usually 24, yes. For me, it was a blessing in disguise. I think for Dave it was too, and I think for all of us. I mean, the majority of the demo was skeletal, but the drums were tracked by June of 2020. So they remained pretty much the same. A few add-ons here and there, a few overdubs. But it gave Dave and I a whole bunch of time to mess around with melodies. Dave, the guitar player. So he would write a melody and I would hear it and I would sing a counter melody, or I would sing a melody and he would play a counter melody. And these are elements that we usually don't add to too many of our records. You know, they're here and there, they're sprinkled in. But this record has a whole bunch of time where you can tell that we thought about certain things and we did it remotely to enhance the record. This said, all the ear candy starts coming in. There's choirs singing. There are church bells. There's a cello. There is, you know, one thing after another. All these things would have been missed if in that 24-month turnaround. So I think that the record itself benefited from that amount of time that the pandemic allowed us to work on this.
That's interesting. And blessing and obviously the pandemic was terrible. People died. But I mean, for me, you would normally be in a radio studio because I work for iHeartRadio, but now I get to be at home and still be able to work at home. A blessing in disguise, so I can interview people whenever I want.
That's kind of right. That's kind of cool.
It is. So what are you most excited about, I guess, for this record for people to hear? I was privy to be able to listen to it before, and even just from those first licks, man, it just, wow, it really takes you for a ride. So what are you excited most about Scorched?
Well, I think, you know, the thing that makes the record to me, when I just mentioned all those different characteristics of it, I mean, that's all great, all well and good, and all that happy horse shit to throw everything in the kitchen sink, but you still have to tie the fucking thing together. You know, you can't just say, oh, everything on this record is different, because that can be kind of awkward when you're listening to difference one after another. The idea is to tie it all together through the mix and put your stamp on it, to take it and make it your own. And I think we succeeded in that. I think we succeeded in it because of the mix. The fact that it has like a traditional heavy metal sound, it has a traditional kind of a thrash sound, it goes back, it's like living in two eras. It is relevant and present in 2023, but something screams in the mix. I'm in 1990 in my head. I'm not going to say organic, but I am going to say that was some of the thought that went into the mixing. And I think that's what succeeded in tying the record together, to make it one specific sound over the course of 3 generations by this point, to be able to say, this is today and this is then. And they happen simultaneously on the same platter. I think that was the key to making this successful. I look forward personally to just get out and play. I mean, that's just, you know, that's what keeps me going. That's the drug I've been chasing for 37 years. You know, you stand on a stage and the first time you get the real high, you're looking for that real high again and again and again and again. And that's what keeps the touring going. You know, that's what keeps the whole thing rolling. So that tour will start the day before the release over in Europe. We'll be in Germany on the 13th of April to start our tour. And then the next day the record comes out. So it's going to be good to get back into that, that clock phase of touring right now.
Yeah, the routine that you love so much and you've been doing for so many years. And People want to see the dates. I mean, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. You have a Bandcamp. The dates are all up there. You may notice because I'm jealous because I mean, obviously I like Overkill, but as you can see behind me, Guns N' Roses in the name of the podcast, Appetite for Distortion. They have not released 20 albums. They do not release an album every 2 years. It would be a very different band if they did. So what I do here is I try to find a 6 degrees of GN'R Bacon. And I'm not sure if you have one. I'm curious if you do have any Guns N' Roses connections. And if not, just what you thought of the band when they debuted in 1987, when you had been doing this hard music for so long and when Appetite came out. So either both of those or just whatever GN'R related you have.
Well, I don't have any 6 degrees.
Okay.
I do remember when they came out, they actually did a show at L'Amour's. That's where I saw them, in L'Amour in Brooklyn.
Right.
This was, I suppose this is the Whiskey Roxy days for them. Gazzari's out in, on the left coast. I can't be 100% sure, but I'm pretty obviously Appetite came out and then it exploded after that. And this is right before it exploded. L'Amour's was a 1,700 seat venue in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn. And we were actually managed by the guys that ran L'Amour. So that's how we got, simply in there. I mean, the band Guns N' Roses was already big, but they were club big at that time.
Okay.
So it was really cool to be involved in that at a grassroots level because it's still a club kind of a situation. And the thing I thought about that record, I wasn't like a big kind of an LA guy for whatever that scene was at that particular time. It was, it was kind of the antithesis of what we were doing. If that was the Christ, we were the Antichrist kind of a thing. I was more of a Slayer fan or a Metallica fan. And not really that Sunset Strip kind of a dude. Let's all go to the Rainbow. We go to the Rainbow, we're getting in a fist fight. That's what we're doing. Kidding, of course. Sure. But I thought that record was fucking dirty. And that's what I really liked about that record. That I thought to myself, oh, it just changed. The whole thing just fucking changed now. Now these guys are going to be being chased by the scene chasers because they've set the bar, and they set the bar way higher, and they did it with simplicity. That's what I really liked about it. They did it with rock and roll. Obviously they had, they were a fashionable fad at one time, but I thought there was a genuineness to it that was, it was more reminiscent of, the Stones' Let It Bleed than it was, Poison's Talk Dirty to me, kind of.
Yeah.
Thing. So, to me, I was always that rock and roll guy. So this kind of shit took me back, this riff oriented, you didn't need vocal perfection. You just needed to get your message across with attitude and melody, and dirty fucking guitars and drums. So that's my first Guns N' Roses experience. And that's just, I can't remember the year.
But still, I wish, cause I guess too young. I'm going to be 40 this year, that I missed out on the L'Amour days, even though I'm from Brooklyn. It's just a little bit before my time, but I hear these wonderful stories about it. So I appreciate you sharing that. I'll just end this because I know you have more interviews to do. This is a question from a listener. What's your favorite Overkill song to play live? This is from Tom.
Well, Tom, there was some kind of an epiphany somewhere in 2010 when writing the Ironbound record. And when I finally got through, when all the smoke cleared, when I was writing my part to that, the melodies and the lyrics, and I listened to what I demoed, I said to myself, I said, this song will be in the set until we die. And I still love performing it to this day.
Right on, right on. So that's for Tom Pasqua. So listeners were excited to hear from you today because, yeah, obviously with a GN'R theme, I might be in that Sunset Strip kind of orb and talking to those kind of bands, but to kind of expand and learn about, because I've had, Dave Mustaine on, I've had Anthrax on before. So I just love learning about that that time and that heavy music that still exists to this day, that people didn't think that maybe thrash would survive or heavy metal would survive, that it was a phase. And look at 2023, we're all, Overkill especially included, just going on these very successful tours, and there's such a need and passion for this music. So just as a fan, thank you for continuing to do it and not stopping.
Thank you. I mean, it's, I tell you, the older I get, the more appreciation I have for even other things that went on around me during that era, including some of that Sunset Strip stuff. I mean, rock and roll is rock and roll. And if it's real,
Sure.
it's real. And it just happens to take many different little faces or changes through it to pigeonhole it into a genre or a subgenre. But it all starts with the drums and the guitar and the bass, man. That's what it's all about.
Yeah, that's what I'm all about too. It's rock and roll, and it's kind of the parallels. Like the theme is Guns N' Roses, but I talk about everything else. It's the nucleus is rock and roll, and wherever it goes, wherever the Venn diagram or that graph goes, that's what I'm into. The guitar and the singer that can just melt your face off, just like you, Bobby. So awesome, and I really hope we get to do this again. Continue success and just continue being the legend that you are.
Brando, thank you.
You got it. Take care. So no 6 degrees of GN'R bacon with Bobby Blitz. However, I really enjoyed his answer about his perception of Guns N' Roses and Appetite for Destruction during that time period. And that's good enough for me. So let's find out the connection, and let's meet John Diva in a segment we'd like to call Appetite for Discovery.
I just want to bury Appetite. That's the goal. Bury Appetite.
For
Discovery!
And now it is time for a segment I really like to enjoy and like to do here on the podcast, Appetite for Discovery, especially when it's an artist or a band that's from another country that perhaps that we don't know here in the States. And I love that this podcast reaches all countries. So perhaps some of my German listeners know exactly who my next guest is. John Diva from John Diva and the Rockets of Love. How are you, Mr. Diva? How are you, sir?
I'm very fine. Thank you for having me. I'm tuning in from beautiful sunny Berlin today, where we're actually preparing for our upcoming tour starting March 17th. And so I'm very fine. I'm happy to be on that very special podcast of yours, which is taped on video and also audio, as far as I understood. So you could either hear us or watch us or both, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's what I like to say. And I'm very fortunate with this podcast because Guns N' Roses reaches all over the world. And I'm lucky, I guess, that I reach all over the world too, even though, because I have listeners who English is not their first language. So when I say like I'm on iHeartRadio, iHeart is pretty much like North America and I believe South America as well. It's not other parts of the world. So I'm heard and seen on YouTube and Spotify and Apple Podcasts, wherever you find your podcast. But what I like is being able to find you, because this is going to be your third album that's coming up, and I'm kind of first learning about you. So I say discovery, but there are people who know exactly who you are. So I want to learn all about the Big Easy that's coming out. But before we get there, I like to talk to all my guests about what they were like when they were young and the path that they went on, because I've spoken about that, how I got into classic rock and how I got into music, but I only know what it's like to be a little boy in, New York. I don't know what it's like to be a little diva in Berlin in Germany. So how did you first get into music, and how did you get on this path?
Yeah, good question. A long time ago. But I can, I'm a classical small town boy in a way. I mean, we moved a lot. I lived in the States as well as in Germany and Europe with a single mom who brought me up and who was totally into rock and roll. So very early there was music around, and I was going for rock music very early. I had my first guitars with 8 or something, and the neighbor kid had his drum kit. So we formed a band at the age of 8 already and jammed out all the time. And trying out for local band contests. So that was really number one. Before there was sports or girls, it was just always music. And I think very inspiring. I look back to, I mean, beside the records of my mother, which was classical, Doors, Janis, the Stones, Hendrix, a lot of Beatles and stuff. I totally was a fan of the Kings. I saw a very early show by the Kings in the early 80s where they pretty much rocked hard. So that wasn't really the 60s sound. It was really, they had a phase where they were rather hard rocky and inspired a lot of bands. I mean, among these, Van Halen, as we all know. And Van Halen was the next huge blow for me, where I really understood, okay, it's going to be the California energy that I'm digging. Because before that, I was rather into Whitesnake, Purple, and all the British upcomings. And Van Halen changed me finally to the good old American, let's say, hard rock. And from there on, I drifted along to California, to all the hair metal, glam rock. And of course, after a while, it came about Guns N' Roses. Who wouldn't?
Yeah, of course. And so where did you live in the States? Did you live out west in
San
LA?
Diego, and for a short while was in Ohio for a while. And so I came across the country here and there.
Oh, okay. And I got to ask the cliche. I mean, what about the Scorpions? I mean, that don't they sing the national anthem in Germany, or isn't?
Well, hopefully not. I mean, it's funny because the Scorpions are a great band, and I think in the metal community, it's totally understood that they wrote some classic albums and that they very early had figured out how to make his record sound really heavy and juicy. I mean, this is really amazing how good they sound. At the same time, they have a very funny reputation in Germany because they're not the coolest brothers on the hood, I'd say, and so it's in Germany, it's a mixture, but people know that worldwide they are very, very popular and well known, and I have a lot of respect for their music.
That's cool, because you never know, and that's what I'm curious about with like other countries where if you're in Australia, if it's like AC/DC or British, right. If it's kind of like that hometown, that's what you aspire to be. But that's cool that you saw Van Halen, which is quite a different upbringing than what you had traditionally. And David, so I'm assuming you were really drawn to David Lee Roth and being a front man. Is that what you is that did you try to play maybe an instrument first, or did you always knew you were going to be a front man and a singer?
No, I played the guitar. I love the guitar, and then you just with a couple of dudes. Let's say you're like 10 or something. You stand in there in the garage. There's another guitar player, and back in that days, it was unthinkable that a drummer would be a singer. So it was either this guy or me, and it was clear to see that this guy, the other guy, he wouldn't sing at all. And at that time, I said, okay, I'm going to do it. But I think that's a classical story for a lot of singers, that they just like start with an instrument and somebody has to do it. And back in that day, they don't know that they probably are singers and will become singers, because I mean, I never was shy. I always was searching for the stage. So I suppose it was kind of meant to be. And coming back to David, when I saw Panama on MTV, I was I was around 9 or 10 years old. This like totally blew me away. Like I have never ever seen such a thing before. Like this entertainment ship, this funny, always smiling, over the top performance, like how they like swing in there. Like I don't know, it's something that really changed my whole perspective on rock and roll, that it just can be funny and smiling all the time. And so I really chose the American Van Halen-ish way from then on, and that was just a huge impression on me.
Do you remember the first concert that you went to?
I mean, there was some rather smaller shows that I probably wouldn't even know anymore who that was, with my mother here and there. It must have been, it was probably either the Kings, they were already pretty old, but still rocking in at the beginning of the 80s. Yeah, it was the Kings.
Okay, that's a great first concert.
Yeah, it is.
That's a legendary first concert. So tell us the origin story of John Diva and the Rockets of Love. How did that come about? How did that form?
Well, all of us were kind of traumatized by the early 90s when Nirvana blew away hard rock, hair metal, and all the big bands of the 80s. And there was a certain time where you could wear a Nirvana shirt and a Guns N' Roses shirt at the same time. But that wasn't possible a couple of years later anymore because everything split apart. And Axl, I mean, we were talking about that later, was enemy number one for certain persons. And so we were all ready to take on stadium rock. And then we found each other struggling through the 90s, like said, fuck, we kind of lost our home, And when we met, it was certain groups of friends, Snake Rocket coming in with Remy Martin, and I brought in JJ Love, who's an old high school friend of mine. And in the end, it was like always, it was like drunk talk, oh yeah, let's make a band, this and that, like back in the days. And Snake Rocket back at the time was a pretty decent booker as well. And he said, yeah, we're going to do it. And the week after, he had a couple of shows already on. And so we had to do stuff. And we started, covering, just doing some tribute shows to just like get warm again. And it worked pretty decently, pretty good actually. And suddenly we had shows. And we had a program, we had a band, we had everything. And suddenly we were booked to really big festivals, mostly over in Germany, Wacken, which is a huge metal festival. And you read the lineup and everything was black, pink, black. Who's the pink guy, So that was John Diva. And that was 10 years ago. And from then on, I would say within the last 10 years, it really went good for glam rock. There's quite some bands carrying on the torch, and but back then there wasn't so much. And I think we hit the sweet spot to start again, and then it was clear for us to do new songs and record our own albums. So it started with booze, like always.
Like always. And you're right. I think that's why, and it's interesting that Steel Panther, I'm sure they get brought up with you because they're one of the bands that lead this renaissance, that they're a kind of, I don't know, I want to say joke, but parody band. However, people want to hear more stuff from them. They like this music anyway, even though they're kind of not making fun of it, but they're just being extra, as the kids say, with it. Yeah. And it wasn't, I don't know if it was really meant to be more than just a live show, but now they're touring the world. And it's the same thing with you, where you're being more serious with it though. So I guess tell me about this upcoming record, because it's I think the one sheet that I got is like, this is going back to the roots of the 80s and the hard licks and the fast riffs. So it's like a month away from the new record coming out?
Yeah, not even. It's also 17th of March. So we kick off the tour on the same day the album is coming out. So that's almost 2.5 weeks, not even. So I'm super excited at the moment, of course. But yeah, just a very, very quick flashback. The first album, Mama Said Rock Is Dead, was like always the debut. You do it fast, you do it quick, and you don't think too much. And it was a huge success. We went up the billboards over here in Germany up to 23 in the album charts. Nobody expected that, really nobody. And we toured our asses off. And that was actually, Mama Said, I would say the concept was write 11 songs that didn't make it on the big records in the 80s, so you could have easily put one to Mötley Crüe, one to Def Leppard, and that was really the concept in a way. Second album, American Amadeus, was kind of over-exaggerate all the alter ego there is in John Diva, make it big. And we took steps to the 70s from the sound, but also as well, bit to country. You could also find a song like Moving Back to Paradise, which would be on a B-side of a David Lee Roth record, for example. So we kind of exaggerated the genre. Whereas now I think we're like really focusing in on good songs, on songwriting, a little bit more classic rock than hair metal, a bit away from LA back to New Jersey in a way. Very American sound, I would say. Big songs, big anthems, and lyrical wise, we're so far away from Steel Panther right now, like Europe is from San Diego.
Okay, I gotcha. And yes, it comes out March 17th. So lyrically, what do you want to get across? Because yeah, it's very different. Because I just use Steel Panther as just the top of my head, because they'll talk about all the cliche stuff, but it seems like you have a little bit more of a focus and a purpose.
Right. I mean, I would say in the whole rock and roll genre, glam rock could be the most interesting right now, because you can choose and read in between the lines. I mean, in the 70s, obviously glam rock was really liberal. You couldn't tell, are these guys straight or gay? Are they just playing with it? So it was really open for everybody. Whereas in the 80s, it was cock rock and very masculine, which we all love as well. And now we can kind of define what glam rock stands for again. So Steel Panther fall back almost like a comedy show and like put the cliches to the extreme. That's why people love it, and it's hilarious. But then again, maybe the road is ending somewhere, because you can't exaggerate again and then again and again. You know, let's see how they're going to do that. And right now I have a feeling that I'm far away from calling the Big Easy political album, but we live in a world where everything is political. You can't really choose not to be political.
Right.
You just walk out the door, you see a bumper sticker, and you know you're in or into it, you know, or not. You know what I mean. So
I do.
Like telling the people it's time to relax, and maybe to take it easy in a way, and to listen to each other, and stuff like that can also be political right away. Or a song like Boys Don't Play with Dolls is probably the opposite of what you would expect lyrical wise.
Yeah, tell me about that. That great song. It caught me off guard, because I was like, that's an interesting title that could, like you said, be political. But talk to me about it.
I mean, you could maybe even say it's a feminine anthem in a way, because it's obviously playing with the cliches. But if you listen close to the verses, it is everything but macho. It's the opposite. It's about cross-dressing. It's about being free and doing whatever you want. And I can see that in the crowd coming out to a John Diva show. You have everybody. You have hardcore rockers. You have blue collar, white collar people. You have young boys and girls who obviously weren't around when the Roses hit the street, and they just like experienced that for the first time. So it's an open space for everybody to do what you want, as long as you want to be glamorous. And so Boys Don't Play with Dolls definitely is a call for being open-minded,
I like that. I like that message. I also like your shirt, but I can't see what it says completely. What? And I can't stress this enough. The fuck. That's what I thought it said.
Actually, I got a couple of new shirts for the shows. Just wait a second. I'm going to show you two more if you like.
Okay, this sounds good. Oh man, I appreciate that. And my shirt, for if you can't see, it's a Snoopy shirt that says "Welcome to the Gun Show."
Oh, nice.
Yeah, that's mine.
That's a good one too. How do you like that one?
Satan loves you. I love it, with two devil hands making a heart for who you are. I like that shirt, actually.
It's deep, isn't it? It has a deep message to it, I think. And this is for the Big Easy, maybe for one of the shows. I like that too.
Okay, it's a girl being eaten by a shark. Stay positive. She's happy while being eaten by a shark. I like that shirt too, man. All right, I like it.
Good shirts, right?
Are these in the John Diva, closet? Are these available for purchase, or are these your special shirts, one off?
It's my special shirts right now. I just like I'm just collecting new outfits for the shows. Over there is a whole bunch of boots and shoes. I can present them to you too, but that might be a little bit going too far. So I'm
That's
just
okay.
collecting stuff right now, because obviously it's a colorful show that we're doing, and we have cheerleaders on stage, we have pyro effects, we have all the Marshall cabinets and special backdrops. So there's a whole lot of stuff going on stage, and as a John Diva, I got to represent.
I like that, and this is why I'm glad you were recommended to the podcast to interview you, because you're right up the alley in what I like, where it's that era of music where you have there's that hint of humor, of course, we're talking about it, but there's also that serious side that, the talented musicians, you're not just there you're there with a reason. You're there to have fun, but you're there to connect with your audience. You're there with a message. So that's part of the reason why I like Guns N' Roses so much. And you kind of have the Axl look going right now with the backwards hat, the bandana, long hair.
Right.
So I'm curious. This was, it's Wikipedia. It's never, I don't know how accurate this is. It said after you finished school working odd jobs, you found employment as a songwriter for bands like Motley Crue, Bon Jovi, Aerosmith, and Guns N' Roses in 1986.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you were writing songs with these bands? Like what does that mean?
That's what Wikipedia says. If Wikipedia says that must be true, right?
Did you write that in there?
I didn't.
Oh, okay. So that's not true. Okay, fair enough.
I mean, there's a lot of legends about John Diva, but this is I'm just smiling that one away now.
Okay, fair enough. All right, I'll leave that up to interpretation then. I got it.
Oh yeah.
But I guess, speaking of GNR, I guess where were you in 1987 when Appetite for Destruction came out? Because that's what, while I liked, I'm gonna be 40 this year, so I kind of was on the middle of hair metal and grunge.
Yeah.
And GNR for me was the perfect blend of it. And so I was still very young, but that's why I gravitated towards that album and that band. But what about you, where you've made this part of your life, that era of music where they were kind of like that, but they were a little different. So I'm just curious your perspective on Guns N' Roses.
Totally. I remember that back in 87, I was craving. You always crave for new music. I was not even a teenager, but just about maybe. And I was in high school abroad, so I wasn't in the States back then. I was over here in Germany, in a small town. And I remember there was word of that band, Guns N' Roses. And obviously I was too young back then, because you could only get that kind of music if you either had money to go to the record store or have an older brother or sister. And besides that, it was all word of mouth, right? So people were talking about it. And before I ever heard the first song of Guns N' Roses, there was so much rumor about it and how hard they would be. And if you listen to it now, it's totally true, because they came out in the same year probably when Whitesnake came out with 1987, which is from the sound a super poppy, almost cheesy album, even though I like it very much, but it doesn't rock, not in the way the Gunners rock. Gunners is like they bring back punk rock to the sleaze glam metal scene. Everything after Guns N' Roses, or everything before Guns N' Roses, once they were there, sounds cheesy almost from that area. It really does. And it still sounds great, Appetite, if you still listen to it. It's the same with the first album of Rage Against the Machine. It still sounds great. Happened to me with the same album a couple of years later, that I said, wow, everything after this record is different. So I had the impression this is a great band everybody's talking about, and they play it rough. But the first song I heard was "Sweet Child of Mine." I said, "Wow, that ain't tough. That ain't hard. What's wrong?" You know. So I kind of, with Guns N' Roses, learned before I was a teenager how important an image is and how important image travels faster than light, faster than sound. It's just there already. And it's so beautiful. So I'm not nostalgic, but looking back to the 80s, growing up, it wasn't possible to get your whole hands on that music. Suddenly somehow you had to wait for a couple of weeks to finally hear a song by the Gunners for the first time, and that made so much expectation. And you know, it's if I think back right now, I'm totally inspired by this story, because I can still feel how I felt when I was like 11-ish in a small town, not being able to get hold of that music.
It really is fascinating, and that's why I am not a millennial, because I remember the days when it was word of mouth, that, you know, the days before the internet, and how difficult that is to get the word out without the social media campaigns. Now, I mean, everyone's spoiled. You know, a song instantaneously. Oh, I haven't seen that movie. I haven't heard that movie. Click, click, click. Now you see it all of a sudden. Yeah. Then you had to wait, and you're right, the anticipation. And it's funny that you heard all these rumors, and then "Sweet Child of Mine" is the first song that you hear, but that's the song that broke the band, really. So that is quite fascinating. Did you ever get a chance to see them at all? Because I know they. Yeah. Oh, you have. Okay.
I think it was my 18th birthday, and of course that's a big one. And my best friends back then, they collected money because they came to Germany, and there was some infamous shows. I saw the famous one, but there was some infamous as well. I think Mannheim was a really infamous one because Axl was 3 hours late or something. The one I saw, everybody was on time. It was like, you know, I got the ticket in February, and the show was in July or something. And, you know, as a 17-year-old or 18-year-old, this is, I mean, you're so full of expectations. And then you hear, okay, this one is going, that girl is going, that hot girl is going, and they want to camp out. And of course, we're going to get drunk, like all the teenage things, you know. So they were featuring Faith No More and Soundgarden as support. And I mean, that was so great. I really remember coming into that stadium, and Soundgarden already was on, and everything was a frenzy, you know. I don't remember that much from the concert because I think it was all too much to take it in. It was like really going to see the Pope or something, you know. It was like something special, and you're like in a state of mind that afterwards you would say, like, I was hypnotized. I couldn't even tell you. I can't remember the show. I can't.
In a way, I admire that, because now, again, nowadays, everyone just has their phone up. So if you don't remember anything, you just look at your photos and your pictures, which half the time, I mean, which half the time you're not even looking at. I can't even remember the last time I actually look at my pictures and videos after the concert, other than like when I posted for my podcast. It's to be present in the moment. And that's what you see. I feel like you're carrying on with the band into 2023, is to be present in the moment with John Diva and the Rockets of Love. And I really do appreciate that from just a fan perspective, because not all bands are like that. It's I don't know. I shouldn't be old and bitter when I'm not even 40 yet. So, but I'm there already.
No, you're not. I mean, it's just like, you know, actually all other interviews I've been doing so far, I mean, of course we speak about the 80s, and we speak what was different, and the Big Easy has some very nostalgic moments, and now we're going really deep into that and sharing our first moments at concerts, and it was a different time. Probably the kids nowadays think it's exactly as special as it is if they go to a show. And I very much hope that the kids who couldn't go out because of the pandemic within the last years take the chance to, really go to rock shows and to be a new generation, to find out how special that is. But
you see a lot of kids at your shows, as well.
Yeah, like really, really more than you would expect, because they could say that's dad music what they do there, but I think because it's also a strange but very strong fashion that we're having here, and it's a fashion that kind of fits the zeitgeist, because everybody is about gender right now, and about what possibly could be possible. And so it's, it's too what I don't like about it, it's an ideology right now. I would prepare it to be a little bit more like in the 70s, that everybody say, hey, it's cool, just do whatever you like, floating. But we probably will get to that again. But at a show, I have that special moment and emotion and energy. So yeah, we have a lot of young kids.
I love it.
Yeah.
So the best way to, you're going to be touring in your neck of the woods. Are you doing the States as well?
Not yet. It's no, you need a promoter, you need quite some investment to go over, but it could easily be, our management is out there, and maybe as a support, something special guest to be introduced to the States. We would love that. Let's see. We don't have any plans yet, but then again, the album's not even out, so everything can happen.
All right, I'm putting that out to the universe, because I think that's what this America needs. That's why I like talking to fans and bands from other countries. It's because the rock heart beats harder in Germany or in South America, and here, I don't know, it's all about Bad Bunny and Lizzo, and I'm just like, it's just not for me. That's why I'm doing a podcast about this era of music and metal and these kinds of people. I think there's special kinds of people that like this music. So it was. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, it is, and of course, we're not reaching out for the masses here as well. It is a rather small scene, but I have the feeling that this scene could reach out a bit more to the mainstream. That always makes it big. At the beginning, Guns N' Roses was not mainstream either, but it became mainstream, so we're also still talking about subculture, but I really have the feeling we're onto something here. And besides, if you do a third album, you are on the map somehow, like all the rock magazines come back to you again and say, we've been talking before, now it's the third album. So you do get a different reputation, respect, and broader review situation. And I'm sure we will find that scenery in the audience in the States. And I would love to go to the motherland, because the States, for me and for that sound, is the motherland more than the UK are, and it would be an honor and a pleasure and such an adventure, but sooner or later, let's see,
Right on. Well, congratulations on the album. And the best way to find out, like, if people can depending on when the people hear this, if they want to pre-order it or buy it when it's out, John Diva Rocks, or just johndiva.com, right? Just johndiva.com. Okay.
Right.
And then we got John Diva Rocks at Facebook. You're on Twitter. You're on Instagram, TikTok. Are you one of those people too? TikToks or no?
We ain't doing that. We ain't doing that.
Yeah, the only reason I have a TikTok, but I don't do the stupid dances. It's just basically a YouTube page. Like, that's just like for my interviews and stuff.
Yeah,
so.
I'm really trying to keep my profile low, just because I think I would go hyperactive and crazy. I simply, out of protecting myself, I'm just like, okay, Instagram is already almost too much for me personally. The band is doing, but for me as a person, my management can do that. I just don't. I just don't like it.
Yeah, fair enough. Honestly, if it wasn't for my line of work, I think I would be done with social media as well. But whatever. It's a chance to meet, people like you, and listen to, connect with fans, other John Diva fans, other GN'R fans. So, of course, is a benefit to it. But anyway, John Diva, it was a pleasure to meet with you today, and I hope we get to do this again.
Hey, call in anytime. It was a pleasure as well. And I think, I said that before. It's a very special podcast you're doing there. Spread the word. Keep the energy high. Thank you for your positive energy and the good questions. I enjoyed it a lot. And talk to you next time.
You got it. So that does it for this episode of Appetite for Distortion. Don't forget the conversation continues in between the podcasts, in between the broadcasts on social media. So don't miss a thing GN'R related or talking about upcoming guests. So Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. Please follow our YouTube page. Follow and subscribe. Always putting up new clips up there as well, in addition to the full episodes that you could watch. So if you listen to these on iHeartRadio or Spotify or Apple Podcasts, you can watch the podcast, even if it's not a Zoom. Like with Mark Rivera was a phoner, but I like putting up a bunch of pictures up there of Mark Rivera and whatever he's talking about. So you can enjoy watching the AFD show on our YouTube page, where you can also find Appetite for Horror. Yeah, my new spin-off horror podcast is up there on YouTube and wherever you find your podcasts, the same platforms, iHeart and such. And recently, I had David Guy Levy, the director of Would You Rather from 2012. Such a good horror movie starring Jeffrey Combs. So if you're a fan of that movie, you definitely want to check out episode number 12 of Appetite for Horror. And it's Appetite and the number 4 Horror on all the social media platforms. So what's to come on the podcast? Well, right now, I think our next guest is going to be Kip Winger. Yes, from Winger. So when I announce that officially on social media, if you want to get in some questions, easy. Just comment on the picture. That's how it works. That's why you want to follow Appetite for Distortion in between the broadcast. So stay tuned for that and what other guests coming up. Also, may I remind you that I do have a Patreon. So what I'm actually going to try to do more than just, hey, I have a Patreon, and if you like to contribute and support the podcast, it's there, is to do Patreon-specific episodes. So I have 2 up there right now. One I just did. One, it's about, I want to do behind the scenes of the podcast, stories that maybe I don't feel comfortable just putting on the podcast, but knowing that a select few of you will hear them kind of gives me a little bit more leeway with sharing these things. So right now there are 2 episodes. So if you remember episode 44, way back, I had Roxana Shirazi from the book, The Last Living Slut, born in Iran, bred backstage, and I was a huge fan of her and the book. I read the book, many years ago before this podcast or anything. So I was a legit fan of the book, and she was a great guest. And interestingly enough, little side fun fact, I guess, about me, that when I recorded that's the day that I met my wife. We had a date before I was recording the interview, and she wanted to stay. So I guess she knew she liked me right away, and she wanted to watch me record the interview. So that was pretty interesting, but that's not about that, the Patreon episode. It's about how after Roxana, we became friendly, and I'm sure I offer co-hosting opportunities, not just to you, the AFD show listener, but guests also, because I think it's a fun opportunity for them. And we were going to get we were working on getting the lead singer from Manic Street Preachers, and she kind of just pushed her way to try to make it only her being the interview, like to interviewing him. And I'm just like, what? This is my podcast. And it was just very weird. So I go into that on Welcome to the Patreon, episode number 1. And number 2, I read you the email that I got about the Duff interview cancellation that happened a few years ago. So you may remember when Duff was promoting his solo album Tenderness, I had an interview confirmed, and then his radio reps canceled it. And I had a back and forth in email, very, very professional. So, and I leave names out of it because I still want to be professional, but I read you the exact email that I received as to why I am not going to interview Duff. And the words that stick with me, that make me kind of paranoid about asking certain questions or certain guests that have affected me a little too much. So that's up there on Patreon. So for a small donation, you can hear these episodes and, of course, just support the podcast in general. And just want to be clever with what I can do to expand this podcast. So any donation is appreciated, but I'm going to put up more special, just for you, Patreon episodes. So stay tuned for those as well. So upcoming guests, Patreon episodes, when you're going to hear the next ones. In the words of Axl Rose concerning Chinese democracy, I don't know if soon is the word, but you'll see it.